Hello, it's me. I'm back to talk even more about Cartoon Network, specifically the mistakes that I made in my 2 Cartoon Network cancelled videos. And first and foremost, thank you to everyone who's watched and subscribed to the channel, left comments, liked the videos. The response has been absolutely mind-blowing. I really worked hard on those videos. I think it shows the amount of research that I had to do, the editing, the writing, the recording. Took a long time. They are easily the biggest project I have ever worked on in my life, in anything. So to see just how many people have engaged with that and just enjoyed watching the videos, they've made people happy. That has been so validating to me. So again, thanks to everyone. But they're not perfect. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There are mistakes, and a lot of you have let me know that there are mistakes in them. So today I'm going to go through those mistakes because some of them are actually really juicy and interesting to get into, and also clarify on a few things where people had pointed out what they thought were mistakes, but actually now that I've looked into it a little bit more, kind of a more nuanced grey area. It's all interesting stuff. It's all Cartoon Network trivia at the end of the day. And this is going to be like way less scripted and less structured than the actual Cartoon Network cancellation videos themselves, because I haven't got the time to make a video like that right now. So hopefully this more laid back format is still, enjoyable to watch. So let's just get into it. And just to clear this up, because there was a bunch of comments like this, Stormhawks, Codename Kids Next Door, Dexter's Lab, Ninjago, The Chuck Jones Show, Johnny Bravo, Johnny Test, Sonic Boom, Level Up, Generator X, and 3 Scooby-Doo shows are in the videos. I didn't forget them. So Blue Silly said, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends first aired and released in 2004, not 2003. You got the release year wrong, just saying. This is 100% correct. I messed up. That's a goof on my end. I put in the little info card that Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends aired a year earlier than it actually did. So that is a cut and dry mistake for me. This was actually literally the first comment that the first video got. The fact that this was the first comment kind of made me think, oh god, is it all just going to be people pointing out problems in the video? But it didn't turn out that way. And so yeah, this is absolutely a mistake, and Blue Silly is correct. Kem Dizzle said, the later episodes of Out in Jimmy's Head were actually recently found in English. That is also 100% true. I somehow missed this. Out of Jimmy's Head was the live-action cartoon hybrid show that Cartoon Network had during the early CN Real days. Spin-off from, is it Reanimated, the name of the film? The episodes had been available in other languages for a long time, but in the original English version, because Cartoon Network tried so hard to bury this show, had been completely unavailable since the show ended. And it was only in 2023 that all of the English language videos became found again. They were found in Germany, because Germany was rebroadcasting the show in English. Even long after America and UK and Ireland and all the other English-speaking Cartoon Network stations had stopped showing the show entirely. So yeah, they have all been found and they are available if you really want to watch Out of Jimmy's Head. There you go. You can now do that. Kem Dizzle also said Samurai Jack was canned due to having low ratings with kids, likely because of its slower pacing. I don't think that is true. I personally couldn't find anything to back that claim up, specifically on the show not doing well because of its slower pacing. Although looking into this led me to an interview with Gendy Tartakovsky and Scott Willis, I think his name is. Let me double check that. Yeah, Scott Wills, not Willis, who was the art director, I think, on Samurai Jack, where they go into a little bit more about why it was cancelled. So while in the video, I think it said because, Gendy didn't want to rush an ending, I didn't really have the context as to why he didn't want to rush the ending. The truth is, according to this interview, that Gendy says Cartoon Network was going through a lot of transitions at the time, and that things were a little bit up in the air between the end of season 4 and the production of what might have been season 5 or what might have been a finale to Samurai Jack. And in that time, according to Scott Wills, Cartoon Network wanted to move the production team over to the Clone Wars series, the 2D Clone Wars series. And you can sort of see the 5th season of Samurai Jack falling between the cracks of Cartoon Network, going through this very sort of tumultuous period, and them wanting to work with Star Wars and the prestige that Star Wars comes with, rather than focusing on an original show like Samurai Jack, which obviously is sort of legendary and esteemed today, but it still is not, it's not Star Wars at the end of the day.
How did you guys feel after the end of the 4th season?
Coming close to the 4th season, we're like, are we going to finish it? And I didn't know, the network didn't know, they were going through a lot of transitions also.
We didn't even have time to think about it because we went right into Clone Wars.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So they even overlapped, I think.
Yeah.
So there was no time to even, think about
To mourn.
That's what happened to Samurai Jack, is that it fell through the cracks, and with all the sort of hectic stuff that was going on, Gendy and the team didn't really have time to focus on a fifth season or a final season or wherever it might have been, which is kind of what happened and why it had to be picked up by Adult Swim so many years after. So while I don't think the idea that it having low ratings because of slow pacing was technically true, it did lead me down this little rabbit hole and find a little bit more context on why Samurai Jack was cancelled, or why it ended. Chemdizzle also says Courage was canned since the network didn't think Courage toys would do well with boys. Again, on this one, there's another interview where the Rebel Taxi interviews John R. Dilworth, and from his own mouth, he says, the network was going through changes. Courage fulfilled its contractual obligations to produce I can't remember how many episodes it was, but they filled out their episode contract, and the new management just wasn't interested in continuing.
What actually canceled Courage?
Courage just, we fulfilled our contractual obligation for 104 cartoons, but everything changed at that time. A whole new management moved in. I mean, it's like the world just got turned over.
That's what I put in the first video, and I kind of stick by that because it's literally coming from John R. Dilworth's mouth, so I'm inclined to believe him over whatever other sources might be out there. Polo Cat Fan says, Ed, Edd n Eddy wasn't cancelled, the creators themselves decided to do a final movie instead of an extra season, and we got the 2 episodes that were already produced since there was no real reason not to air them at that point. Cartoon Network at no point cancelled the show. Yeah, this kind of goes into one of the things that I wish I'd done on the first episode and kind of went back and did a little bit more on the second episode, that I clarify specifically why shows are in this list and that I'm covering every show that ended for any reason, not just like traditional pure cancellations, because I think that's more interesting, and because some shows are kind of grey areas where cancellation in the sense that the network doesn't want any more of this show and therefore they're not ordering any more episodes of that show, you would say that's typically a cancellation. But during the period where Cartoon Network has a 6-season limit on shows, that is ultimately the same thing. That is ultimately the network deciding that they don't want to order any more episodes. So even if a creator sees that final season coming, that season 6 coming, it's still kind of cancellation in the sense that it's the network's decision. That is the network deciding to end the show, even if the creator is well aware of that limit that they're going to be have imposed on them. But yeah, no, the point stands. I absolutely should have explained why shows are in, and that I'm not just covering everything that's cancelled in a traditional sense. I'm counting shows that have ended for any reason. Hopefully, I think most people kind of understood that from the context of the video, even if I didn't, outright say it, which I should have done. And I do make a point in the second video that I highlight that before, we go into any of the shows. So hopefully that was enough to stop some of the confusion. Nameless Mixes said, Winx Club is a mess. It originally aired on 4Kids TV, formerly Foxbox, I think, and then started airing on CW for Kids. Meanwhile, it would also air on Cartoon Network during Magoozy. Cartoon Network was where a lot of non-US English regions would see the series, Canada, UK, etc. D Cooper 8730 said Winx Club didn't air on Cartoon Network first, they aired on 4Kids TV. Cartoon Network showed Winx on the Magoozy block. And Bluey Blue 5831 said, I'm no Winx expert, but didn't it air on 4Kids first? This was without a doubt the most obvious mistake in the first video. This is the thing that has been pointed out by these 3 commenters and probably a dozen more at least. This is 100% a mistake on my end. Winx seasons 1 and 2 were shown on 4Kids TV on the US before Cartoon Network, and then from season 3 onwards it was on Nickelodeon. So at no point was Winx Club broadcast in the US on Cartoon Network first before any other station. That is basically the one qualifier that I imposed on all these shows, so Winx shouldn't be here. I mean, you can consider it a bonus, but it is absolutely a mistake that I included it, and I really probably shouldn't have. But, I'd rather include shows that I shouldn't have rather than exclude shows that I should have, which does happen. You'll find out later in this video. Yedai Guy 9432 said CN was actually conceptualized by Jim Samples, starting with Reanimated in 2006. Stuart Snyder simply continued his plan. Again, this is kind of true. Like, Samples did intend to produce live action content. You can find interviews with him. It's kind of my bias that I just assumed that Stu Snyder was the guy behind all of it, because that's the sort of the narrative that was running at the time, and it's my bad that I didn't really fact check that as thoroughly as I should have. Though whether it would have ultimately resembled Cartoon Network as it existed under Samples, or whether it would have been slightly different, maybe it wouldn't have been as sports heavy, maybe it wouldn't have been as game show heavy, maybe it would have been slightly more like Reanimated, where it's, you know, original scripted content that still kind of feels cartoony in a way. We don't know, but it is true that the first live action projects were actually greenlit under Samples, even though I think he'd gone from the network, he'd been fired. But he didn't technically get fired, he resigned under under a very controversial episode in Cartoon Network's history, by the point that these shows and movies were coming out. So yeah, that's a mistake. We've also got to factor in, which I kind of didn't really point out, that the writers' strike that was going on in Hollywood during this period, which made scripted TV shows more difficult to produce, obviously, because there's no writers, which led to an increase in game shows, reality shows, just across American TV in general. So even under Stu Snyder, had the writers' strike not been happening at that moment, it's entirely possible that, yeah, again, you know, the CN Reel, if it was to exist, if live action content was to exist on Cartoon Network, might have looked completely different under different circumstances. Flora Fiore and D Cooper 8730 point out that I'd missed Totally Spies in episode 1. No, that's totally not that I forgot the show existed and didn't put it in episode 2. Even though I mention it in regards to other shows, I somehow overlooked that Totally Spies was on Cartoon Network. Aired original episodes on Cartoon Network. Luckily, I am so lucky with this that technically Cartoon Network didn't start debuting episodes until 2010, which gave me enough time to record a Totally Spies segment and put it into the second episode. That was very lucky, so thank you to D. Cooper and Flora for pointing those out, because I absolutely would have missed it if it wasn't for their comments. Random Reviews 4278 says, well, technically Johnny Bravo ended in 2011 if you count the movie. I'm not counting movies, although this is quite interesting. Johnny Bravo Goes to Bollywood was something that, as far as I'm aware, only aired in Cartoon Network India, maybe Cartoon Network Asia as well. It never aired on Cartoon Network USA, so it wouldn't count anyway. But it's a movie. There is a Johnny Bravo movie that came out in 2011 about him going to India, going to Bollywood. So yeah, that's just interesting. It doesn't actually impact the video too much, because I wouldn't be counting movies anyway, because it's not part of the main series. But interesting Johnny Bravo trivia for anyone who wasn't aware of that. Jaden Kudo 3008 says, what about Bakugan? It only aired in the US on Cartoon Network, and because it's not very popular in Japan, the later seasons were ordered by Cartoon Network and Teletoon, so despite being an anime, I think would definitely count as a Cartoon Network show. This one is kind of inconclusive in a grey area, because if you ask me, the show itself is still anime, I guess. It's produced in Japan. It's a Japanese original idea, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, it's absolutely true that it was mostly funded in the later episodes and later seasons with money that was coming from Nelvana, the Canadian company, animation studio, and it was produced for North American audiences, again, especially later on. Most episodes actually did air in the US and Canada before they ever aired in Japan, and season 4 didn't air in Japan until 6 years after it was completed and broadcast. So this is kind of one of those grey areas. I discounted it kind of off the bat because I'm just looking at it and going, yeah, that's an anime, and it was made in Japan, and it's not just it was anime influenced or anime styled like Totally Spies or Avatar: The Last Airbender or something like that. This was a fully Japanese production, but it changed to be more of a North American targeted show which again, yeah, kind of puts it in a grey area. So inconclusive on that one. I'm not sure if I would include it if I was redoing the video again. Maybe it's worth a mention. Maybe some of these shows that are sort of like in that grey area are worth a mention. Not Hurt says, it was probably answered at the beginning, but I was half asleep. Fair. How come Batman Beyond isn't here? Wasn't it cancelled in 2001? This is one of those like really interesting sort of grey area ones, because technically by the rules that I established like really early on, I should mention Batman Beyond, but when I explain why I didn't, it might make a little bit more sense. So Batman Beyond debuted on KidsWB, except for a single episode. One single episode went live on Cartoon Network first, in December of 2001. That is because KidsWB was running episodes a little bit early, a few months before Cartoon Network, because it was a KidsWB show. So KidsWB originally intended to air it in September of that year, but because of the contents of the episode, because there's bombs and violence in a city, and they intended to air it in September of 2001, they pulled the episode. But by the time we got to December and it was in Cartoon Network's rotation, they decided to go ahead and air it. That might have also happened in other parts of the world, countries where they were less impacted and therefore less sensitive around 9/11 and showing terrorism on TV or whatever as part of shows. But certainly in the US, that one episode aired on Cartoon Network before it aired on KidsWB. I could have included it in the list, and I do think it's interesting, but it kind of would have been weird to count it as a Cartoon Network show just due to this weird, interesting but weird technicality. So technically, Not Hurt, you are correct, but only because of Osama bin Laden. So, was it worth it? Interestingly, on a similar but less terroristy note, the same thing seems to have happened with Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries, where when the show was coming to its end, KidsWB for some reason just never showed the final episode, not because of any sort of censorship reasons or sensitivity reasons. I guess they just wanted to start whatever was coming up after Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries, whatever was replacing it. Scheduling got confused and they ended up showing whatever the new show was when they should have been showing the finale of Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries. So Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries' final episode never actually aired on KidsWB. It was only broadcast 2 years later when the show was being rerun by Cartoon Network. So again, Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries and Batman Beyond are shows that I could have included for a single episode on a technicality, but I chose not to because it kind of wasn't really in the spirit of the video. But technically they did debut a single episode on Cartoon Network before anywhere else. Get Good at Gaming said Megas XLR didn't have poor ratings, it had the same amount of viewership as Ben 10 and Samurai Jack. The creators used a lot of CGI for Season 2, which they were already making before Season 1 even fully aired. Cartoon Network cancelled the show, but they greenlit the finishing of Season 2. Too bad Adult Swim didn't air much adult cartoons by then, otherwise Megas XLR could air on Adult Swim, they just had to reduce the CGI usage. And then Rigby is the Man said Megas XLR was even more popular than anything they had at the time. It was not due to poor ratings for its cancellation. These two takes are true, partially. I think there's a little bit more to it. But yeah, I stated in the video that Megas XLR was cancelled due to poor ratings, which is absolutely not the case. These two comments are right to point me out for that. Megas XLR did have solid ratings, but the original executive producers that kind of greenlit the show left Cartoon Network to go work for PBS. Meaning the show didn't have the same sort of level of executive support from the higher ups as like the other action shows at the time. So I know Sam Register was very supportive of Teen Titans. Ben 10 made so much money that I can't imagine anyone not being behind the show at the time. Whereas Megas XLR was kind of left a little bit to stand on its own 2 feet. Didn't have that backing up of an executive in the same way that those other shows did, which were all competing for the same demographic. Cost of CGI, I couldn't find anything to say that specifically was a factor. But all this other stuff that I'm saying comes, directly from the mouth of the creators. Jody Schaefer on a podcast called Waffle Press Movie Podcast.
At the time, one of the reasons we did get canceled was because they also had the original Teen Titans and Ben 10 were going out, those were 3 properties that were all competing for the same audience. And although we were like our ratings were on par with theirs. Like that was something people don't realize. So we were actually a really popular show, go figure. But they were Teen Titans, and Ben 10 was Sam Register's baby. And I said, well, and at that point, Linda Semensky, who was our executive, she had moved on to PBS, so we didn't really have anybody in the upper echelons to fight for us. And that's just the nature of the beast.
He goes into, the reasons behind its ending and the fact that it wasn't supported by executives, despite the fact that it had solid ratings. But Cartoon Network already thought that they had that demographic covered in the other shows, like, Samurai Jack, Ben 10, Teen Titans. And if a show had to go, unfortunately, it was Megas XLR, just because it kind of didn't have that support network around it. Nat Knutson 1482 said Robot Jones lost his voice because a higher-up wanted to give a gig to his kid. It was pure nepotism. The second season, with his original voice, meaning the robotic text-to-speech function, existed solely as a collection of tapes owned by the creator. I couldn't find anything specifically to say that the voice actor for Robot Jones, the human voice actor, was a nepo hire. The kid, I say kid, be a fully grown adult now, Bobby Block had comparable, I would say, credits under his name by the point that he already got the Robot Jones voice gig. So I don't know if I don't know. I can't find anything to say specifically that they were a nepo hire, but I can't find anything to say that they weren't. I can't anyone with the surname Block who was big in Cartoon Network at that time, but I could be missing something. But I'm inclined to say that probably isn't true. Noah Nater said, thanks so much for all the work you put into this. Thank you, very much appreciated. It was a very intriguing video with lots of info and great editing. Only one I noticed you missed was Skunk Fu in 2008. That's not a mistake. Skunk Fu debuted on KidsWB and Cartoon Network only showed the reruns. Noah Nater also asks about the outro music I've used on both videos. That is, as they correctly point out, Amelia Watson's aquarium stream. I don't know where the music comes from beyond that. I think it was originally commissioned for that stream, but I've never been able to find the composer or the person who created it. So this is my shout out to you. If anyone knows who made the music for Amelia Watson's aquarium, I think it's the gift shop music, let me know. I want to thank that person because that's a really good piece of music and I'm getting quite a lot of mileage out of it. Kevin Croft 3087 says, what about Reboot? That was my favourite show. That is a mistake that I completely overlooked. Season 4 of Reboot debuted on Cartoon Network in 2001. I think it was originally ABC that broadcast it in America, but then Cartoon Network aired the 4th and final season. So that is, absolutely a mistake for me. That's more annoying than the Winx one, where if I'm including a show that shouldn't have been on there, that's like a little extra. But this is something I completely missed, was Reboot debuting on Cartoon Network. So apologies for that one. Namda2Base6477 said Cramp Twins didn't air on USA Cartoon Network. It's only airing on the Fox box, later on 4Kids. And Mega Animazing says something similar, saying here's a fact about the Cramp Twins. Well, yes, it did air on Cartoon Network in 2004. It aired 2 years earlier on Fox box. Again, this is a mistake, although the less annoying one, where I'm including more content. Cramp Twins did debut in the US on 4Kids Entertainment before Cartoon Network. Still, personally, to me, would feel really weird to leave it out, given that it was made by Cartoon Network. I know it was Cartoon Network Europe, not the USA, but it's still like a Cartoon Network show. But technically, these guys are right. It would have been correct to not include Cramp Twins, but it would have felt weird. Mathanafel, I think I'm saying that right, said, Courage is pink, not purple. My god, he's right. Why have I always thought Courage was purple? Hootang1437 says, did he mention Mucha Lucha? Not a mistake. Again, Mucha Lucha was another show that aired on KidsWB before Cartoon Network, who just reran it. Nizmozd5930 said, Star Wars Clone Wars is definitely not 25 episodes. What the fuck? It's 133 episodes. Not a mistake there. I think you're confusing the two Clone Wars shows, the 2D one by Genndy Tartakovsky and the longer 133 episode one by George Lucas and Dave Filoni that was 3D. That's Clone Wars versus The Clone Wars. It is kind of confusing, to be fair. Serendipity7 says, in reference to the Sinbad show, it was definitely greenlit, and all these other Sinbad shows and movies and adaptations were greenlit in response to Aladdin, which Yeah, obviously, actually, looking back at it, that is a super obvious reason why in that period after Disney's Aladdin came out, there was so much Sinbad content. Tito Vito 007, where is Carrot Top's AM Mayhem? This is one of those things where it's a block, it's a programming block where Carrot Top had live action skits and comedy stuff in between episodes airing, but I agree it is a kind of a grey area. I can't remember if this came up or not in my research at all, or if I dismissed it as a block early on and then not really come back to it. There is definitely a different block that fits into this mold that I genuinely never came up in my research, but I can't remember if Carrot Top's AM Mayhem did or didn't. But yeah, I agree. I think it is a bit of a grey area because some blocks get counted as shows in some resources and some websites count shows like, you know, like the Toonhead stuff or the Moxie show get counted as shows, whereas things like Magoozy or Carrot Top's AM Mayhem or Johnny Bravo TV, I can't remember what it's called, or they get counted as blocks for some reason. It's kind of more nuanced than it either is or it isn't. But yeah, I think there's a fair shout that Carrot Top's AM Mayhem should have at least gotten a mention in the videos. So mistake on my part for that one. Jetstorm39 says, man, no Transformers like Beast Wars, Armada, Energon, Cybertron, all streamlined through Cartoon Network. It's how I'm a huge fan. Wish it was shown in this vid. I was looking forward to it. Sorry that you were looking forward to that, but by my rules, I don't think any of those shows should have counted. Beast Wars, from what I can find, was like a total syndication. It only really aired on local networks. In some regions, it might have debuted on Cartoon Network, but it wasn't certainly wasn't a nationwide, you know, US-wide Cartoon Network show. It was mostly local stations that aired it. And then Armada, Cybertron, and Energon were anime. They were anime Transformers series, so I haven't included them. But there were, you know, other Transformers shows that do get included in, I think, episode 2. Yuki Bear says, in response to Code Lyoko, correction, those weren't 4 heads, those were 5 heads. That is correct. I'm going to delete the video now and re-upload. Undead Shah Games 9489 says, my brother, that Shinji hand was uncalled for. That's not a mistake, that's literally the best part of the whole video. Zach K2216 says, Sheep in the Big City didn't get cancelled because Americans didn't like the show, but ultimately because of wrong place, wrong time. Season 2 of the show appeared in August, and then 9/11 hit, and having an army general fight a sheep in a bigger city wasn't really what people wanted to watch at that time. I can't find any thing to prove that it was because of that, because it was related to 9/11 and the subject matter. Most sources that I had said it was due to low ratings, which I'm inclined to agree. Although I did find something that said Sheep in the Big City was cancelled to make room for Codename Kids Next Door. That might also be true, but there's not enough to back that up. I certainly couldn't find anything to do with 9/11. If you've got a source that suggests that or confirms that, I would be interested in seeing it, but at this point I can't validate that as a theory. Alexander Minas 28 says, random fact, Slam Ball, before it aired on Cartoon Network, it was on Spike TV. I don't know if this is trying to, you know, make a correction or anything, so I don't want to, you know, assume what the commenter is meaning by this. So I don't think they're trying to point me out. They're just saying that Slam Ball did air on Spike TV before Cartoon Network, which is true. But the show on Cartoon Network, I'm counting as a Cartoon Network original because the weekend packaging that Cartoon Network showed was unique to Cartoon Network. It wasn't the same thing that was shown on Spike TV, but that is true that Slam Ball as a sport was shown on Spike TV before Cartoon Network. TYVB said, this is going to sound strange, and they're right, it does, but Cartoon Network had a call-in segment on Cartoon Fridays. One of the numbers just led to a call center where the manager started having intercourse with a female associate. I'll never forget that. I have no idea what that is, or if it really did exist, but if it did, that is wild, and I think that would be a great subject for a video if anyone can point that or validate that ever actually existed, because that would be absolutely crazy for Cartoon Network to put out there. BRU says, what about this show? It was on Cartoon Network in Brazil, and they link to a video of a show that was called War Planets in America. In Brazil, it's Guerreiros de Sombras, and it was in Canada, it was known as Shadow Raiders, so it had a different title to War Planets, which was the American title. That's not a mistake. It didn't air on Cartoon Network in America, so I didn't count it for that reason. It aired as part of WB. I think originally it's a Canadian show. Pika Scout said, wait, no Two Stupid Dogs? This is kind of one that took me by surprise. I was expecting to include Two Stupid Dogs as well, but it was a TBS show. It aired on TBS before Cartoon Network, although it was a Hanna-Barbera production, and it was greenlit by Fred Seibert, so spiritually it kind of was almost a forerunner to Cartoon Network shows. Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't include it. Wasn't included either, but technically by my rules it was not a Cartoon Network show. It never aired new episodes on Cartoon Network, so it wasn't included for that reason. Texas T says, what about Pirates of Black Waters? Pirates of Dark Waters was a show that was also a Hanna-Barbera production, and it did air on Cartoon Network, but it was first distributed on Fox Kids and then moved to ABC. And it finally moved again to local stations under the fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera, where it would, distribute its final episodes. That all happened between 1991 and 1993. It didn't start airing on Cartoon Network until 1994, and those were all reruns. Those were all episodes that had been shown previously on those other networks, so it doesn't count as a Cartoon Network original, even though it did air, really early on in Cartoon Network's run, but they were all reruns from other networks. Naruto Jaden says, what about My Life as a Teenage Robot? That is a Nickelodeon show, so I didn't include it for that reason. That's pretty cut and dry. Catalyst1337 says, I was thinking SWAT Cats would be on this list. I love that show. Pretty sure it got cancelled in 1995. Similar to Pirates of Dark Water and Two Stupid Dogs, SWAT Cats was a show that ran on TBS shortly before reruns started coming out on Cartoon Network. So very early on in Cartoon Network's days, it was one of its reruns. So easy to understand why, if people saw it there first, why they would assume it was a Cartoon Network original, or why they would associate it with the network, especially if they're watching it when they're younger. But technically, it was a TBS show. Paula Kernler says, there are a few not on here that I remember, like Oh Golly and 16, a cartoon about 16-year-olds who frequently hang out at the mall. I can never find anything on Golly Gopher, though I fully remember it airing between 2008 and 2009. 16 is included, it's in episode 2 rather than episode 1. Golly Gopher was an Out of Jimmy's Head character. Golly Gopher was the Gopher character from Out of Jimmy's Head, or reanimated. And the Oh Golly thing, the show that they're referencing, it was a short that was only on the reanimated DVD. I don't think it ever aired on Cartoon Network. I couldn't find anything that said it aired on Cartoon Network between 2008 and 2009 in the US. Possibly it might have done, but it was it was a DVD extra. Maybe some cross wires going on there, or maybe it did air on Cartoon Network, but I haven't been able to find any evidence of it. Meep DeWalks says, I remember a Hot Wheels show, 2001, 2002, what happened to it? So this is something that I had completely overlooked, and again falls into that sort of nuanced grey area category, which was Hot Wheels World Race and Hot Wheels Accelerators. These were Hot Wheels movies, okay? They were designed and created as Hot Wheels movies, but they aired on Cartoon Network and were split up into like mini seasons of shows. So technically they're movies, and I wasn't including movies, like Fire Breather or whatever it was called. So I might have overlooked it for that reason, or I just never saw it come up in any of the research that I did, because other places don't count it as shows, count it as a movie. But yeah, there was these two films, World Race and Accelerators, that were broadcast split up into episodes. So I would say they feel more, certainly as you're watching it as a kid, they would feel more like shows. They would feel more like series than they would movies. So I would be inclined to say this is a mistake, something I overlooked on my part, and I probably should have included something about World Race and Accelerators. Numa282 says, probably matters to no one, and may not even be super accurate, but I was able to find a possible airtime frame for Yoko, Jakamoko, and Toto, at least according to the Cartoon Network Adult Swim Archive fan site. It is alleged that the show premiered on the 22nd of August 2005 and last aired on the 23rd of March 2006. Again, not even kind of important, but I know when I'm unable to find data I was researching, even if it's small or inconsequential, it'll take up a space in my mind rent-free forever. That is absolutely the case for me. So Cartoon Network Adult Swim Archive is one of the key resources that I was using for this video because it is absolutely essential to finding the air dates of some of these shows. And this might be correct. I included Yoko, Jakamoko, Toto in the video, but I said that I didn't know when it aired. I just assumed it was sometime around 2006. And this might be correct that it finished airing on the 23rd of March 2006. It's probably the best guess anyone can have, but the Cartoon Network Adult Swim Archive isn't super conclusive about the date in question, 23rd of March 2006, whether that was a rerun of a previous episode or it was a premiere of a new episode. That's kind of important to how I'm making these videos, is being absolutely dead certain that that is the final time a new episode premieres, because that's totally different to, you know, the last time they show a rerun. So while I think March 23rd, 2006 is a very good guess and probably the correct date, I wasn't convinced enough 100% that I felt like I should be including it as a hard date in the video, so that's why I left it a little bit inconclusive. But it's such a niche bit of information that it probably doesn't matter to anyone, but if I can't find it, it really does stick in my head rent-free, like Numa says. Moxie G said, Ed, Ed and Eddie ended, which isn't easy to read out, because the creator was violently shot 7 times in the head by police over an emotional breakdown, so the production team cut the show. This is one of those urban rumors that I've seen floating around, not just in these comments, but I've seen, previously commented elsewhere that Ed, Ed and Eddie, the creator was killed by police. That is not true, although it is actually based on a real event, which was not the creator of Ed, Ed and Eddie, but Paul Boyd, who was an animator for the show and did the animations in the opening sequence. The famous sort of like whistling on the white background Ed, Ed and Eddie opening. That guy was killed by police. It was very controversial. A very controversial incident. I mean, obviously, because the guy got killed in the streets. I believe it was in Canada. He had a breakdown, and he was a danger to, potentially himself and other people. But the way that the police handled it, as far as I know, without digging into it that deeply, killing the guy after they'd already kind of incapacitated him, which was what was specifically so controversial about it, almost like an execution style killing. But yeah, he was an animator who'd worked on Ed, Ed and Eddie. I also see it getting mentioned that he was the guy who did the whistling. That was different. That was a different person who actually did the whistle on the opening, the whistling to the Ed, Ed and Eddie theme tune. That was a different person. He wasn't involved in this. It was specifically the animator Paul Boyd. So not the creator, not the guy who came up with the music, but still, someone who was deeply involved in the show. And I'm sure it impacted everybody working on it. But yeah, that wasn't linked to the reason that Ed, Ed and Eddie ended specifically. Veritas69420 said, great vid, though I noticed you didn't include JBVO. Why is that? This is the one I was mentioning earlier, the Johnny Bravo interstitial sort of block. And this one 100% never came up in my research. I don't know how I missed it. I don't know how I didn't even accidentally stumble on it. Some of the resources that I found, most of them consider it more of a block than a show. So that's probably why I didn't see it. But I mean, this is very blurred lines at this point. If Moxie counts, if I'm counting Moxie, if most places include the Moxie show as a show in its own right, and some of the other anthology series is, Cartoon Roulette, for example, is I feel like JBVO is adding way more original content, and the other one as well, Carrot Top's AM Mayhem. Feel like I probably should have included them, so apologies for missing that and not even considering it. But yeah, I do think JBVO, if I'm counting other programming blocks and interstitial content, I probably should include JBVO. Kirby Pink Cutie said, I'm not sure if this is something I imagined as a kid, but I clearly remember getting freaked out when Cartoon Network decided to stop or cancel the airing of Little Lulu. It was narrated by a male voice each time they rolled the credits, almost like breaking the fourth wall. I swear I can't be making this up. There was a Little Lulu animated series, but it aired on HBO for seasons 1 and 2, and then HBO Family for season 3. I don't think it ever actually aired on Cartoon Network, but if it did, it would certainly be as a rerun, which is why it wasn't included. But you didn't make it up. It was a real thing. It did exist. It was just on HBO. Markel DeWitt7 says, hold up, time out. If I'm not mistaken, I could have sworn it was Justice League Super Friends before it became Justice League. I'm not going to count this one as a mistake on my end. There was a Super Friends cartoon, but they originally ran on ABC in like the 1970s and the 1980s. So like way outside of the scope of this video. Like Cartoon Network didn't exist in the 70s and 80s. So these were like ABC shows, completely separate production connection from those Super Friends cartoons and the DC Animated Universe Justice League shows. But the Super Friends cartoons did rerun on Cartoon Network during its early years, as they were included as part of the Hanna-Barbera, library content archive. So they probably did air on Cartoon Network, maybe even concurrently, I'm not sure, which is maybe where some of this association is coming from. But yeah, the Super Friends cartoons were way before the Justice League shows, like decades before. They weren't Cartoon Network shows originally. Plasma Mini says, so I might be able to get an answer on here. There was a show I watched in the early 2000s. All I remember is the show had space pirates, I think, and a character had a surfboard. Don't even know if it's real. I don't know. I tried to look some of this up, and I couldn't find anything definitive as to what Plasma Minis might be referencing. But by all means, if this sparks something in your mind and you think you know what they're talking about, please leave a comment. I thought maybe Treasure Planet or Captain Harlock were the first things that came to mind. Brave Star, which is like a 1980s cartoon that was set in space, or maybe even like if we're talking about the surfboard thing, the Silver Surfer Marvel show, or maybe even like something I found that was Space Pirate Mito, which is an anime thing that I wasn't really aware of. Could have been that, could have seen that somewhere. If anyone else has any ideas what they could be referencing, leave it below. But I'm pretty sure whatever it wasn't on Cartoon Network, at least not originally. Miroslav Zima 8856 says, I vividly remember there was a bumper for Plastic Man when the show ended. They even added the hobo sack on a stick. It made me sad. Again, I'm sorry Miroslav. I don't know specifically what he's talking about. Plastic Man is a DC character or a Marvel character? I actually don't know. A DC Comics, yeah, DC character. Yeah, of course he is, because I've seen him in he was in like the Batman Brave and the Bold. It could be any number of DC shows that have aired on Cartoon Network over the years, where Plastic Man featured as a character. I can't even take a guess as to what it might specifically be. If anyone does remember Plastic Man with like a rag on a stick, like the old hobo classic imagery, leave a comment below. Hopefully Miroslav sees it and we can get to the bottom of this. Red Hog says, no Zoids, Toonami Classic, unless it was on that one channel with Yu-Gi-Oh!, Beyblade, Digimon, Pokemon, etc. No mistake on Zoids, similar to some of the other series like the Bakugan thing. Zoids is an anime. It's probably more of an anime than Bakugan. So I didn't include it for that reason, even though a lot of these anime are very beloved by Cartoon Network fans and hold a special place in people's hearts, from watching it when they were kids. I understand that completely, but for the scope of this video, I just couldn't include anime because it would be so long. Those videos probably wouldn't even be out yet if I included anime. And a lot of the reasons, obviously being non-American series, a lot of the reasons why anime conclude have nothing to do with Cartoon Network at all. So even if they were broadcast in America first on Cartoon Network, it kind of doesn't fit the spirit of the videos I was going for. No shade on anime though, I love anime. Sideshow 00 left this big long comment, which is it's an AI generated comment about the Camp Lazlo incident where Joe Murray refused to appear in a McDonald's commercial, and that ultimately led to Camp Lazlo getting cancelled because he'd annoyed Cartoon Network executives. The gist of this AI comment is that it's trying to say that was incorrect and that the McDonald's incident actually happened on Rocko's Modern Life, not Camp Lazlo, and that Camp Lazlo's was actually about a Kraft macaroni and cheese commercial tie-in that also annoyed Joe Murray, which is wrong. First and foremost, you can't just. This is a good example of ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, just hallucinating incorrect facts. There was a Kraft cheese commercial tie-in for Cartoon Network that also annoyed Joe Murray and Danny Antonucci, the creator of Ed, Edd n Eddy. That was Cartoon Network Invaded, where there was an emphasis or a push for creators to include cheese as a part of their the episodes. Would have been much easier for Foster's Home. And that is true, that did happen, but that didn't have anything to do with the cancellation of Camp Lazlo. That was just another thing that kind of became a sticking point between Joe Murray and the network, but also Danny Antonucci and other creators have said that it was a very badly handled product placement thing, and that it annoyed them that they were kind of pushed into doing this. But the McDonald's advert controversy where Joe Murray refused to appear in the ad, that is absolutely to do with Camp Lazlo. That has nothing to do with Rocko's Modern Life. ChatGPT or whatever AI this is trying to split the two incidents between the two shows, but that's not true. They both happened on Camp Lazlo. I even show in the video, I show the commercial that Joe Murray was supposed to appear in alongside Everett Peck, the creator of Squirrel Boy. And it's clear that they use a different guy. I think he was an animator or one of the storyboarders. No, he's a character designer. They used a character designer for Camp Lazlo instead of the creator of Camp Lazlo. It's very clear that Joe Murray was supposed to appear in that ad. There's an interview where he talks about it. So this is a case of AI hallucinating a series of events that aren't true. So that's not a mistake on my part. And don't trust everything just because an AI large language model says it. You forgot Survive This from CN Real, you stupid big ugly bitch. That's a little bit harsh. Oh, that's me. That's my comment. Okay. Yeah, so this goes to kind of show just how disliked or disinterested people were in CN Real, because I got a load of comments on shows that I either missed or I'd made mistakes on that show how much people care about these shows, that they want the correct information out there, that they're willing to go and leave a comment that corrects me and points out where, even if they really enjoyed the video, if I make a mistake about something they like, of course they're gonna come out and correct me on that because they care about this show or this series or whatever, and they want the correct information to be out there. I 100% get that. I really like that. I've come to when I first got some of these comments pointing out mistakes, I was like really insecure about it, but the more I got them and the more I kind of saw how passionate people are about these shows, it really turned around, and I now genuinely like getting comments where I'm getting corrected. This kind of was the opposite of that. This was an entire series that I missed called Survive This on CN Real, and nobody pointed it out. I found out about it because I saw like another Cartoon Network video, or specifically a video about CN Real, and they mentioned this show, and I was like, why have I not heard of that? Why did that never appear to me when I was researching this? So yeah, I mean, that kind of just goes to show how little people care about CN Real when on regular cartoons, on Cartoon Network animated shows, I can get called out for making the slightest mistake, but on CN Real, I miss an entire show and nobody cares enough to point that out to me. That speaks volumes, really. So now on to the comments from episode 2. There's a lot fewer of these. I mean, obviously partially because episode 2 got fewer viewers. I think less people are interested in the more recent history of Cartoon Network compared to the 90s and 2000s, where a lot of people have a lot of good memories. Or maybe I just got better at researching and there's less mistakes for people to point out. Who knows? So Jacob Sunday 6561 says 2013 was a hard year to be a Cartoon Network fan. True. Favourites ending and the death of action cartoons on the network. Also, I'd mentioned that Chowder and Flapjack weren't casualties of CN Real as much as people would love to say. I'm not necessarily inclined to believe that. I know that the comment doesn't expressly say that CN Real wasn't a factor. So there could have been other things at play, and that may well be true. There usually isn't one, definitive reason. There usually is a multitude of things happening that lead to the cancellation of a show. But CH Greenblatt has a Tumblr post where he expressly says that Chowder was cancelled because of CN Real. There's nothing direct from Thurp Van Orman on Flapjack having the same treatment, getting the same treatment. But reading between the lines and a lot of other sources citing that CN Real was the reason, or was at least a major factor, sort of, to me, that fits the bill as why these shows got cancelled. I think CN Real was a major factor, was probably the biggest factor in why Chowder and Flapjack got cancelled. But if there are other sources out there that say otherwise or can prove otherwise, or if Thurp Van Orman comes out and says something, or someone else, I'm open to listening to it. But right now, I can't agree with that comment that they weren't casualties of CN because I think they absolutely were. Similarly, along those same lines, XCNQURX says Flapjack wasn't cancelled to make room for CN Real, but instead Cartoon Network was told by the FBI they could no longer air it because it lines up with real world events and was giving away way too much classified information. What? Like, I don't know what that's... I have no idea what that's referencing or what that's referring to, but if anyone can find anything on that, because I couldn't, if anyone can find anything about the FBI cancelling Flapjack, that would be interesting to read. I'd like to know more about that. I Punch Turtle says, bro didn't even comment on the creator of Uncle Grandpa posting that revolver in his mouth. Shaking my head. I didn't know about this. I'd seen the image, but I didn't know it actually came from Peter Braungard, the actual creator of Uncle Grandpa. So yeah, that is a mistake. Maybe the greatest blunder of all time. Latest News Tune 321 says, I think you forgot to add Powerpuff Girls shorts, We Bear Bear shorts, Uncle Grandpa shorts, regular show shorts, and Adventure Time shorts. This is a mistake, absolutely. The shorts are much more difficult to research than mainline series because they're kind of ancillary and people don't always include them as you know, part of the main show or don't think to mention them. And some of them are released in places, you know, maybe online or part of DVD packages. And so the release is counted there rather than on TV broadcast, which honestly makes sense for most instances, but for the purposes of this video is kind of unhelpful. So the Powerpuff Girls shorts, I think, from my research, were only online. The Adventure Time shorts were mostly DVD exclusives, except for Frog Seasons, which did air on Cartoon Network. Same for the regular show shorts. I think they probably aired on Cartoon Network. We Bear Bears had shorts, and I think it was only seasons 2 and 3 that aired on Cartoon Network. And Uncle Grandpa, I'm pretty sure, like Powerpuff Girls, was only online and never aired on Cartoon Network. That's what I could find from my research, although it could very well be wrong. Because like I say, this is much more difficult to research than mainline series, especially when there's so many different avenues that Cartoon Network can release going into this period, with much more online stuff, app stuff, and also having like home media releases, which aren't a thing anymore. I think this was probably the most avenues that Cartoon Network could release this sort of short content on, between the channel and home media and online, which is why things get as confusing as they are. But definitely some of those, the Adventure Time shorts, regular show, and We Bear Bears, I should have included somewhere in the video, so that is a mistake. Official Gamer News says, I was convinced as a kid that I was the reason Hot Wheels Battle Force 5 was cancelled. I was watching new episodes posted on Cartoon Network's website, and in one scene a character was about to crash, and I swore I heard him shout, fuck. Posted about it in a comment section with the timestamp, and not long later the show was cancelled. Well, actually, I did look into it, and it is your fault, Official Gamer News. That is 100% true. The show was cancelled because of your comments, so you gotta live with that now. Sorry, guy. Ilan Profile is saying in reference to Generator X, thought the last episodes aired at 7 AM with no promotion after being leaked online. The show was treated horribly once Ben 10 Ultimate Alien ended. Weird they didn't try to keep it running alongside Ben 10 Omniverse. I couldn't find any evidence of final episodes, the run up to the final episodes being leaked online. There was one episode of season 2 that was leaked on Cartoon Network's website before it was supposed to be on TV, but I couldn't find any evidence that season finales or final episodes running up to a season finale were leaked online, so I don't know if this is true. I'm going to say that's not a mistake for now, until I can see otherwise. Jim LLC says, in reference to Powerpuff Girls 2016 reboot, specifically the bit where I say, you know, a writer was self-inserting themselves with Blossom, which was creepy and one of the controversies around that show. Jim LLC says, just to clarify, that writer actually had no part in it. That was included entirely by other members of the writing staff as a gaffe against the said writer. It's still fucked up, but the writer himself seems clear from that wrongdoing. That is technically, I would say, a mistake on my part. It was cleared up in a 2017 IO9 article that it was the other writers that created the Jared Shapiro character, but they based it off Jake Goldman, who was a writer. The article says it was cleared up by Cartoon Network spokeswoman Jean Wu, who doesn't exist, so that was a bit of a red flag. I spent like an hour trying to find any evidence for this person at all, until discovering that they meant Jean Yu, who did work at Warner Media as part of their publicity and communications team. You would think that if your entire article hinges on a statement from a company spokesperson, you would at least try to get their name right, but then again, I'm not professional journalist Both Ildecan. But regardless, that still doesn't entirely wipe the slate clean for me though. Even if Jake didn't write this self-insert character, he still voices him and was presumably fine with the idea. Like, it doesn't go to production and with that guy voicing the character if he doesn't, at least kind of sign off on that. And more concerning for me is the fact that although this controversy peaked in 2017, Jared Shapiro was not a one-off character. He was still appearing in episodes that debuted 2 years later in 2019, still being voiced by the same writer. So it seems that even though people found it creepy that members of staff on the show were creating characters based on adults that were romantically entangled with kindergartner characters, nobody actually learned anything from this. They thought what they were doing was acceptable all along and just carried on doing it regardless of the controversy. So, while I think that's technically true, I think the comment is technically true, it wasn't that one writer who created that character for himself. If anything, it's worse. It's worse that a group of people all thought that this was acceptable and carried on doing it even when they were pointed out that it was weird and creepy and that they probably shouldn't do it. Ratchet1019 says, no Tenkai Knights, was that not a Cartoon Network show? This is a very similar situation to Bakugan, because although it was funded by and produced for North America, in this case it was the company Spin Master in Canada, I'd say it's still anime. It was directed, written and animated in Japan by Studio Bones, which is a very prestigious anime studio, so all the creative side of that happened in Japan. So I say it's more of an anime than not an anime for me, but I do appreciate that it's kind of a grey area. Not Telling 4066 said, small note, Chima was actually not related to Thundercats. That's a common misconception. While Warner Brothers and Lego always had a strong partnership, Lego's TV cartoons, minus Unikitty, were always produced independently of Warner Brothers and air on other channels outside the US. The creator of Chima has thoroughly debunked that they reused Thundercats assets. Also, he created Ninjago. Chima was in production for years, since like 2008 if I remember correctly, was developed alongside Ninjago as a Ninjago replacement, with Ninjago's ending in mind, as Ninjago originally intended finale was in 2012 and only came back due to fan demand. This is maybe one of the most contentious points in terms of like where I was researching. I'm ultimately going to say kind of inconclusive on that fact. I think there's a lot of weight behind both arguments. The Lego guys basically saying that they didn't reuse assets from a proposed Thundercats line, and the guys working on Thundercats saying no, they definitely did. So at first, when I read this comment, I thought it must be wrong, because I'd heard this Thundercats Chima link years ago, and there's plenty of mentions of it out there. But looking more into it, it's true that Tommy Andreasen, the creator of Chima and senior creative manager at Lego, flat out refutes that there was ever any Thundercats Lego sets in development, and that there is no direct link between Thundercats 2011 and the Chima brand. So I went back, traced the original claim that there was a link back to a 2017 podcast with Dan Norton, the art director of Thundercats 2011, and he says this.
I wasn't sure what was going to happen with Warner Brothers, and I didn't want to give everything away, but then once I really knew that, things weren't going to happen, then I was like, okay.
Did they even tell you? I mean, how did...
In a nutshell, there was tons of factors between visibility, toy sales, all the stuff that Warner Brothers would want to track, for licensing and marketing and all this kind of stuff. The business factor of television and animation is challenging. So we weren't getting the airtime. We weren't getting stuff. And there was a big Lego deal in the works. And Lego, actually, to their credit, I mean, they wanted to make a Thundercats line, both new and old version, classic version, and the business that they came to, they couldn't come to an agreement. There's a lot involved, and at the end of the day, they didn't include Thundercats in the deal. And so how do you make money if it's not going to be in with everything else? They were like, hey, all right, Cartoon Network, Lego, we're going to take the show off the air. The prototype stuff that you were making, just go ahead and use it, rebrand it, and make it yours. And so that's how Lego Chima got formed. So once that came out and Cartoon Network aired that, I mean, we knew we were done. There was no way, like, you can't take it from a serious thing to be a kid thing and then try to like reboot a franchise. It just wasn't going to work.
There's no grey area for me as far as I can tell. He explicitly says Chima came from Thundercats Lego prototypes, and that just feels like it makes sense. The narrative of what he's saying feels logical. The theming, the designs of the characters line up, the timeline matches. It's so obvious once it's pointed out. So what Dan said then got signal boosted by this video from Secret Galaxy, who play a portion of the interview, which prompts Tommy Andreasen, the Lego guy, to respond on Twitter and flat out deny that this was true, that Chima was not repurposed from any Thundercats Lego prototype. So where that leaves things for me is, I don't know Dan Norton, I don't know Tommy Andreasen, I have no reason to believe one of these guys over the other one. All I do know is that they cannot both be correct. So while I wish there was a clean-cut resolution, all I can say on this one is come to your own conclusions. Also, I spelled Tommy Andreasen and Thomas Sorensen's names wrong in the info card, so that is a mistake. That is a mistake on my part. Nicole Viper 4090 says, I was about to say I thought you'd missed a series called The Oddbods, but I realised it might not have aired in the USA on Cartoon Network like it did for me in the UK. That's true, The Oddbods never aired on Cartoon Network in the US and is actually still technically a running production, so even if it did, I don't think I would have included it anyway because it's still a current series. Ziel Valdez says, wait, wasn't Mighty Magiswords cancelled because the creator had CP? No, technically. It's true that the creator was arrested for that, but luckily for me at least, the show had actually finished airing long before that got exposed. It meant I could talk about Mighty Magiswords without actually talking about, the creator and the horrible, deplorable stuff that he got up to, because there was enough of a gap. So it didn't actually have any impact on the cancellation of the show, because the show had already ended years before that. But it's true, the creator of Mighty Magiswords was arrested for having CP on his Google Drive, I believe. ALNP1IM said, where's Villainous? I don't believe the show is still going and the lead's working on other projects and making a cartoon for YouTube. Not a mistake in terms of Villainous is a Cartoon Network Latin America show from Mexico, though it didn't air in the US on Cartoon Network. Instead, it was shown on HBO Max, never Cartoon Network itself. That didn't stop it though, having crossovers with Victor and Valentino, as well as being referenced in Mighty Magiswords, and of course the crossover nexus from OKKO Let's Be Heroes. And that's really the final mistake that people brought up or people thought had been made. Although I do want to point out this from Mega Sick Chris, which is one comment that has been repeated many times, is that the link between Piccola and Gregory Horror Show. I was only vaguely aware of Gregory Horror Show, and I didn't really put the two together, but yeah, people who are familiar with Gregory Horror Show, a lot of them are like surprised that Piccola even existed. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. I think it says Peccola in the trailer that I used in the video. The link between the two, though, essentially is Naomi Iwata, who is the creator for both of these shows, and which I think is what appears so discordant between the two, because the tone of Piccola, which is obviously very child-friendly and happy-go-lucky and very light, completely different to Gregory Horror Show. And it's obviously such a distinct art style as well with the cube heads. So yeah, that was a comment that I thought was just worth mentioning because so many people have brought that up. So that's it really for the comments across both videos. I want to say again, thank you to everyone who's watched this video, and thank you to everyone who's watched the two main Cartoon Network cancellation videos. It took a lot of work, but it's really nice to see the validation and the response that they've both gotten. As for the future, I'm going to, because it was the most requested and because I think the response to the videos has been so good, I'm going to try to look at doing a Nickelodeon one. If the information is out there on Nickelodeon shows in the same way that it is out there on Cartoon Network shows, I should be able to put something together. I don't know exactly where the timeline is, because I know the start of Nickelodeon is much more of a sort of blurred, gradual transition into what we know as Nickelodeon from the old style of Nickelodeon that had been running since the 70s. So I'm going to have to come up with like a cut-off point probably in the 1990s. And like, fingers crossed for all the obscure shows, there is enough information out there. It's going to be kind of weird because there's two big elephants in the room for Nickelodeon that and one is like a good one and one is like a bad one. The good one is I'm not going to be talking about SpongeBob. I might talk about, I think there's a couple of SpongeBob spin-offs, but if I'm talking about shows that have ended, SpongeBob ain't ending anytime soon. So it's going to be weird to talk about Nickelodeon without mentioning their big main franchise. I mean, I suppose it's sort of similar that Cartoon Network ones I didn't talk about, Teen Titans Go. You know, as successful as Teen Titans Go is, it's not SpongeBob SquarePants, so that's going to be weird. The other big elephant in the room is the bad one, and that's, I'm going to have to talk about Dan Schneider a lot. I'm going to have to talk about him so much when I'm going through all the shows that have ended. That's unavoidable, unfortunately. So unless I can find some sort of workaround, I'm not entirely looking forward to that, but I think it would, you know, it'd be worth it to do a Nickelodeon show, even if I have to mention that guy about 1 million times. Other than that, I mean, this is long term down the line. I would like to revisit Cartoon Network and combine the two videos into one and include any of the mistakes from this video, anything I might have missed, and then update it with things that may have been cancelled in between the original release and that new release. But that is going to be a long time off. I don't think it's worth doing now. I certainly don't think it's worth doing until this merger between it looks more likely to be between Warner and Netflix, or the acquisition, than Paramount at this point. But I would want that to go through, and I would want the dust to settle, and I would want a bunch more shows to be cancelled before I look at releasing a remastered version of the Cartoon Network things. But yeah, priority right now is going to be on seeing if a Nickelodeon video is viable. I don't know if that's going to be the next thing I release. They might have some smaller projects in the fire before that. But yeah, that's going to be the big project. So yeah, hopefully everybody looks forward to that. And again, thank you to everyone who's watching. Thank you to new subscribers, commenters, and all that. It's really, it sort of keeps me going and keeps this channel going. So thanks. Yeah. Until next time, thank you.